Hello and welcome back to Storied Arcs, where we are going through our favorite comics and trade paperbacks from indie comic publishers and creator-owned stories. I am your host, Mike, and I am here with my co-host, Alex.
Hey, Mike, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing quite well, aside from the aforementioned root canal earlier today. But I'm powering through, and honestly, I took like the Advil that I was allowed to take, and then I plopped down and read this trade in one sitting, which was a reread. Which actually this leads me into kind of my first question for you. Before we get into the story, how much time do you think it normally takes you to read a comic issue or a trade? And I realize mileage varies significantly writer to writer.
Yeah.
But ballpark, what would you say? Like, because I'm an avid user of Goodreads. It's the only social media that I'm very active on. And I feel like I'm cheating when I list trade paperbacks as a book I read, and it counts toward my book goal. I'm like, but it is a book. It's a complete story.
Absolutely.
Most of the time, even if it's, a segment of a larger story. But most of the time, they're taking me 90 minutes tops, for a 5-6 issue thing.
That seems about right. I guess it definitely varies if it's something I've never read before in single issue. I don't know. Maybe, I think you might average maybe 10 to 15 minutes, maybe for a single issue. Obviously, depending on writer and depending on artist.
Depending on the art, because sometimes you have to like chew on it a a bit, or you have to study it a little bit more.
Yeah. Some writers are obviously way more dialogue heavy, and some are
yes.
not. So,
and to me, there's an optimal amount. And for me, the balance is, and I think this is something Paper Girls does well, by the way. When I want to spend about the same amount of time on each page, like I don't want to have light pages followed by a page that's just all dialogue or all text narration. And the worst example of this that I can think of was a book that I enjoyed, AD After Death by Scott Snyder and Jeff Lemire. It would be like some pages were using like a typewriter font that was a little difficult to read, very small, and it would just be 8.5 by 11, maybe even bigger than that.
It's bigger. It's a magazine-sized book, yeah.
Yeah, it's a magazine-sized book, and it would just be wall-to-wall text. And then the next 30 pages would go by with almost nothing on them, except like beautiful watercoloring from Jeff Lemire. And then you'd stop and pause again, and it feel that uneven pace. I like getting into a rhythm with it. Yeah. And I think Paper Girls just keeps you moving.
I definitely agree with that. I think that's a strength of Brian K. Vaughan's writing. And I think that's completely separate. It's independent of what artist he's working with. I think all of his books tend to read that way. I don't know if he deliberately scripts his books that way, but it definitely does feel like you're reading at a very solid, steady pace. That's not always the case for some
Tom
writers.
King is like that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like other people I'm thinking of that do it well. But as I mentioned, the Scott Snyder After Death one, I think was kind of an exception, because I think of like Snyder's Batman, and I thought, I don't remember that ever feeling like a slog, or even just this unevenness that I'm talking about.
That could also be the difference between doing for-hire work for one of the big two versus a creator-owned book, where you have more freedom. I think of someone like when a lot of the books that Jeff Lemire writes and draws himself. A lot of them are very dialogue and narration light. It's a lot of his work.
Oh, they're very sparse.
It's very sparse when he writes and draws his own stuff. It's incredibly sparse. It's different when he works with other writers, with other artists on some of the books. So it really does depend. I think someone like Jonathan Hickman right now, when he relaunched the X-Men title a couple of years ago under House of X and Powers of 10, the house style for the X Office then became these data pages that were, sometimes they were text, sometimes they were graphs, all these different things that were, inserted in the books that I know a lot of people saw those and just balked at them. Like they hated them. Like I'm reading a comic. I don't want to read a bar graph, or I don't want to read this text or anything like that. in specific
I was
comics.
kind of in that camp, by the way, but I was sold what I think was a bad pitch. I had never really read X-Men comics before, and someone told me House of X Powers of 10 was a good jumping in point. And I was like, it's a number 1, but I don't think it's a good jumping in point. There's a lot of like, who is this? Where are they? What are they talking about?
There is. I can see how it would be marketed or pitched that way. Yeah, I think it definitely helps to have. I mean, I have a pretty deep X-Men knowledge, and there were plenty of things because they're pulling characters out of literally out of the woodwork. So
okay.
So
they weren't like prominent characters.
Well, it was everything
right before this issue.
It was they called it a soft reboot. It was essentially a complete hard reboot of the X line. So I'd say a lot of longtime X-Men fans picked up those books and were like, I don't get these data pages. Like, what are we doing here? What's this style? But in that specific context for me, I like those because, I like that they're being creative with the format. And I like that it permeated through all of the X books. Like, it wasn't just an X-Men. If you're reading any of the X titles, whether it's Marauders, New Mutants, X-Force, Wolverine, whatever it is, they all have these data pages in there. That's just like the house style for them. So it does break up the reading, like you're reading, almost like you're reading chapters within the issue itself. Because all the time we think of...
And I'm actually fine with that, because other books do that.
Mm-hmm.
To me, when it feels random, I think it's the problem. It's just like, it's a little speed bump for me.
I can see
a deal breaker.
I can see that.
Okay. So, on to Paper Girls. Last time we ended kind of with a discussion on time travel, and you really had me chewing on that, and I thought of 2 other types of time travel in fiction.
Okay.
And I think you will probably say at least one of them falls into one of the buckets you already laid out.
Okay.
But one of them kind of emerges from this story where we have the Terminator type time travel where things are kind of, there's no multi-timelines, there's no alternate timelines. It's not the Back to the Future splinters off type thing. However, it is this cascading effect where you can go back in time and change something and the ripple does not hit you immediately when you've done something. I think it's the same in Looper, the movie.
The Rian Johnson movie. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's similar, and I think that one's nebulous, but I think it is important when we get to the question of why doesn't old Erin remember the scar on her. I think it's exactly that type of phenomenon. And then the second type I just want to throw this in because I really like this type of time travel. This I do not think ties into Paper Girls at all, but what I would call either the recursion or the Days of Future Past time travel, where you send someone backwards through their consciousness. The fact that it's been done more than once, to me, means, yeah, it's technically a genre, and it's supposed to feel more grounded than time travel. And it's like, by the time we're buying into a time travel plot, I think you can just do it however you want to do it.
I would agree. I would agree.
But I loved that was the way they handled it in Days of Future Past. And if you ever read the Blake Crouch novel Recursion,
I have not.
Okay, same concept. Oh man, he's just nerd candy. He's a strong writer. His first book that I read was called Dark Matter, which is about multiverse stuff, but not in a capes or hero type way, like an everyman multiverse. And this other one, Recursion, is an everyman time travel book with like the Days of Future Past premise. And that is not spoiling anything because he's one of those guys who loves sci-fi elements, but he will like rip the Band-Aid off about what's going on very quickly because that's in service to the story. It's not the main attraction.
It's not the reveal that there's something going on. Yeah.
Right. And that's my thing is I don't like when someone tries to make a meal out of just the concept. And it's like, it was time travel. I'm like, I just sat through like a whole book for you to tell me like a concept for sci-fi. Like I have no problem using that concept, but you also have to write a story. Yeah, the concept isn't the story.
I think that's the pitfall most bad genre fiction falls into, where it's all about the concept and that's the hook as opposed to the concept being a vehicle to actually, tell a good story.
Right. And that's, again, circling back, that's why we love Paper Girls because
absolutely.
I'm in for these characters, whether there's time travel or not.
Yeah, I agree. So,
but I love the time travel.
Yeah. So, well, as we're moving in here, so we're talking about the second trade of Paper Girls, which is issues 6 through 10 of the run, published from June 16th to October 16th. And a quick recap again, as we explained in the first episode, we're not going to go through a beat by beat recap. That's not what we're trying to do here. But we're assuming if you're listening to this, you have already read the story and you know what happens. Or you haven't, and you simply don't care about spoilers. So we're not going to try to explain every beat, every page, every panel. But overall view of what happens in this issue, at the end of the first trade, they activate the Apple, the mysterious Apple device they find, and it transports, Aaron, Mac, and Tiffany into the year 2016. And KJ isn't there. They don't know where she is. And in 2016, the first person they meet is a 40-year-old version of Aaron, still in Stony Stream. And this volume is about them teaming up to try to find a way to try to find KJ, and then ultimately potentially a way back to 1988. So this theme here, we saw time travel, in the first arc when the teens and the old timers came back in 1988. And now here we have our characters ourselves have been thrown into the time stream, in this case, going forward 28 years from 1988 to 2016.
Well said. So, I kind of wrote, I think you wrote thematically, I wrote issue by issue, and I think that's just going to create a natural cross section, unless it doesn't, but,
we'll see.
Well, yeah. So we'll start with just issue 6. We open in 2016 with adult Aaron, and in this initial confrontation, what I just talked about. So maybe we can get into this Terminator time traveling stuff. Old Aaron, it seems like she's always had this scar, but never known why, because the cause of it had not happened. So I guess my question was, are the future and past progressing simultaneously? Which was part of my problem when I read. I didn't see the play, but I read the plot or the script for Cursed Child.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, well, you've got these characters in the present moving forward, and you've got characters in the past moving forward, and they seem to be affecting each other in real time. But I'm like, anything they're doing in the past should be already set and done so that the future is set. But that's the same as the future past problem, right?
Yes, yeah.
Like the Sentinels are almost in until Jennifer Lawrence's character makes a real time decision in the 70s, and then all of a sudden it cleans up the future.
Yeah. That falls, at least that kind of cause and effect is, it's similar to kind of the Back to the Future idea where it isn't changing Back to the Future, every little decision, every change basically rewrites the entirety of the timeline. There's one timeline that's constantly being rewritten. So going back in time constantly changes that. What we see in Days of Future Past and things is like specific events can be changed, like when Mystique makes that choice, the entire world doesn't change. It's just the Sentinels are gone. It's like small things can be overwritten. Small things can be changed. And I think that's kind of what we see. And I don't know, it may be coming up in the next issue when clone Aaron shows up in the past, when she's talking to the confused Uber driver, and she's giving some things about, she's very much saying, look, there are no alternate universes, no alternate worlds. There's one timeline. Things here and there maybe can be overwritten, because she says very explicitly, like, when we're done here, nobody's going to remember anything. So clearly in the future, they have a way of erasing the past. So with 2016 Aaron, adult Aaron, by the way, at no point are we going to call her old Aaron. because as
since we're both older than her.
as someone who is definitely older than that character right now, we will not call her old Erin. But
well, thanks. I was reading it, and I am older than the character, and I didn't realize I was older than the character.
Yeah.
So now it's just gonna bum me out.
Yeah.
I think that's issue 8, and she says, well, you have Mac repeating the line, "Your ending is your ending, no matter what." When she finds out that she dies of leukemia. But then you have Clone Aaron saying there are no parallel realities, only one timeline. But again, I wrote down the question. I wrote that quote down because it's key. Yeah. But I wrote the question, can we believe that?
Well, exactly.
There's another teen from the future telling us how it works. And, I was like, maybe it's like the Loki show where the entire show, everyone's telling him how the TVA works. Like, we prune the timelines. There aren't multiple whatever, and you get to the top of that, and there is one person calling the shots, and it's only that way because they decided that, and they've kind of pushed that dogma down on all of their followers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think it is definitely worthwhile. But
we at least know the theory they're operating with.
Yeah, and at the very least, Clone Aaron believes that, and not only does she. I mean, we find out later. I think in that issue, she's communicating. We think with Heck and Nando, and she refers to one of them as her uncle. So this is she references her family spaceship, which is the spaceship the girls encountered in the first book. So we are being told that she is from the future. She knows Heck and Nando. We met them in the first arc. We know that our 4 paper girls trusted them. At least when it came, because they obviously saved Erin in the future and brought her back. So, we're being led to believe that maybe, it's being shown that the people from the people from the future, the kids from the future, the young people, this is what they believe and this is what they're passing down. And so far, the characters from that timeline we've met have, I guess, seemed trustworthy. They are the ones that our protagonists have already trusted. So why would they not trust this other person from the future as well? At least for the time being. We have we have nothing to contradict her view of time travel because it's the only one being presented right now.
Sure. Yeah. So it's just a matter of when you first hear it from the teens early on, we think the teens might be the bad guys. Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, do you always trust the theory of the world and how everything works for the bad guys? Yeah. Then it seems like, well, they're not really the bad guys because they help them out. Yeah. Meanwhile, also in issue 6, we get these cutaways to the grandfather saying that this quartet of girls, like everything rides on them. Yeah. Like whatever that means. Everyone's fate lies in the hands of that quartet if they can get back to their own time. Yeah. Very enigmatic. Mm-hmm. We have learned from the teens that the old people are bad. This is presumably the leader at this point of the old people. But we learn that he is rooting for the girls in a sense. Yeah. And you get a warning from KJ's hockey stick later that other Aaron, who is created by the teens and identifies as one of the teens from the future, is not to be trusted. So now we're kind of playing with lines here and good versus bad, young versus old, all that stuff. So anyway, I think we can I'll keep moving through the plot, but we just jump in whenever we hit a theme or anything worthy of note. I thought it was very, very confusing. The other thing I wanted to add is these issues seem to have titles. I don't remember that in 1 through 5. But if not titles, they're like little opening narration quotes. But to me, these were like the essence of Brian K. Vaughan. The ones I wrote down were "The present is not a gift." Nice little wordplay there. "Only time is timeless." Another good one. "Fourth folding now," which was just written on the side of the stick.
Hockey stick, yeah.
Like, oh no, wait. After that, it says, "The here and now is neither here or now." And then issue 10 is "What is past is epilogue."
Yeah. So what I'll say real quick is there were epigraphs not in issue 1, but in issues 2 through 5. were epigraphs, but they were in the future language. And so, because the internet is the internet, people very quickly figured out the character substitution. So I did not do this work. I was lazy and just did a Google search. And so I have translations for all of the various, panels and word balloons that have that language.
Wait,
there.
You have them written down?
No,
I'd be interested to hear the epigraphs.
Yeah. So, I do have them there. I copied them off, whatever website I found them from. Sorry, I didn't give credit. There's like 45,000 of them out there. So if you just search, Paper Girls language translation, I'm sure you'll find them. But the epigraph starting in issue 2. Issue 2 is Nostalgia is Death. Issue 3, Death is Forever. And I believe that's, that may be where we first get the line from them about, your end is your end. I think that's where that came from.
Right.
Issue 4, Forever is Now. And issue 5, Now is Gone. So there is this sense of, there is kind of a theme there with these epigraphs in terms of
those seem much heavier. These ones, This round seems a little more whimsical, like tongue-in-cheek.
A little bit, yeah.
Funny.
Mm-hmm.
To be using the word present like that. The present is not a gift.
Mm-hmm.
Only time is timeless. The here and now is neither here nor now. What is past is epilogue. Seem a lot less grim than nostalgia is death. Yeah. Death is forever. Forever is now. Now is gone.
But it's the same kind of wordplay, though.
Yes.
So there is some sort of theme there that they're trying to get across with those.
Yeah. So anyway, we see this new Aaron emerge, and the most jarring thing, they put her deliberately in a panel, which I guess is goes back to your case against using the guided view if you're reading digitally, but you can see her face of this clone Aaron next to our Aaron, basically side by side, just so there's not any confusion that you are supposed to be interpreting this as Aaron. Yet she has to use her collar to relearn the quote-unquote dialect.
Yeah.
Meaning speaking at all. That's where we get the first folding, which is our terminology for like time travel terrors.
I guess, yeah, that's the place where you can move between time and space.
And it's interesting. I don't know that I've ever seen time travel depicted as a tear like that. I think of tears as multiverse stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what we were doing in... Oh, you know what? I just thought of an example. I was going to say maybe that's what you're doing in BioShock Infinite. I couldn't remember if that was an alternate reality or traveling time, but you definitely do that in Dishonored 2, if you ever played those games.
No, not much of a gamer.
Okay.
But if you
have the terror in one hand, and like some of them you have to like go back in time, grab the key off of this counter, go back to the present, turn the key, put the key back, otherwise you'll ripple something bad. You have to think about like 40 chests like that.
Yeah, but I think you're right that typically when we see this kind of holes in reality, the kind of thing, it's more along the lines of what you see in the Philip Pullman novels, like the Subtle Knife kind of thing, where yes. you're not traveling when you step through the breach there, you're not going back in time. You're simply slipping to another reality. While here, these are portals to the same reality because they're, we haven't left Stony Stream. We're still in suburban Cleveland. Here we're traveling through time and time only. But they're ending up in effectively or very similarly the same general geographic area.
Yeah. By the way, I just wrote down, this is a fun one. I hope they leave it in the TV show. We got the teaser this week, which by the time this podcast comes out, you'll probably have a full trailer.
Yeah. The show might be out. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? But they were reminiscing over the lost Walden books and not old Aaron, adult Aaron, says Amazon's.
Yeah.
Which is, of course, who then bought the rights to the show.
Yeah.
I think it's an act of cowardice if they don't leave that in.
Yeah, and especially with Ali Wong, who has been cast as adult Aaron. I think she will deliver that line with the venom it deserves.
Yes. But you also start to, and this is, again, you're getting all these crazy theories of how things work, and, this is grim and this isn't grim. And then you get this little zoom in at the end of issue 7, where Mac, is complaining about how disappointing the future is, which honestly, 2015 came. I tried wearing my jean pockets inside out. Did not catch on like Back to the Future 2 said it would. We had no hoverboards working on water or otherwise, and we had no flying cars. So the 80s projection of the future was just so optimistic. That Mac is completely disenchanted driving around. And Tiff says, I think the future is like the past, only a little less crappy. And I'm like, that's like a really bold, optimistic statement from Brian K. Vaughan. And I think that is kind of Brian's view, that like things do get better, but not at the speed any of us expected them to.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I think, when you look back at history, there seems to be these giant leaps, especially if you look back and let's just look back at the 20th century, where it started and where it ended. The amount of, well, and also I think we tend to think about the future in terms of specifically technological leaps, which we have defined as electronics and things of that nature. But the seemingly vast leaps we made towards the end of the century versus where we were at the beginning. But if you look at it from kind of the long view, when you're in it, it seems to happen very slowly. So, the idea that, the future is effectively like the past. It's just, things get a little bit better. But yet not at the speed we think it does, because we're to someone from, 1922 versus 2022, it would seem, like a massive shock. But,
right. But from 88 to 2016.
Exactly. Yeah.
In
the long view of history, it's pretty short.
Yes. And I think, there's a lot that could be said about that, but I think we'll have a lot more opportunity to say that as we're going to keep dealing with time travel. It's not a phase in Paper Girls. But, right as we hear them expound this view, the other thing I was just going to say is I think the overly optimistic view of the future ends up making certain, like our generation and upcoming generation, like Gen Z, cynical. It's George Carlin who said, a cynic is just a disappointed idealist. And, someone who really thought things should be great, or sees how things could be great or should be great. And then you are confronted with reality and you're just let down. And that's Mac.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. And I think it might be adult Aaron as well.
I think so. A little bit. Yeah. Well,
adult Aaron thinks this, and then you have Mac get it reinforced on the next page. Mm-hmm. The next page, she finds out she dies in 92.
Yeah. So you find out that she's got 4 more years to live. And that brings up a question I did want to pose. If you could be told with certainty, like 100% certainty, would you want to know when you die?
No.
You would not.
I've thought it's a quick answer, but I've thought about it quite a bit. I think I live with enough existential dread that's self-inflicted without any type of omniscience.
But if you knew with absolute certainty when you would die, would you consider that dread? If you knew on a certain date at a certain time you would die.
I think it just says a lot about me, the fact that I just said that.
Yeah. Okay.
If I found out that it's in the year 2080 and I live to the age of 95, I'm like, I guess that would be fine. But I'm, why do I have to do the math every time? 36. And
Oh, I have no idea how old I am. I've got to remember what year it is, what month it is, and then do them. Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah, I've got an abacus here to count it.
I stopped counting my age like
which is my
20 years
first
ago.
clue of how old I was. I think if it was like, I find out that I die 4 years from now, I think that would heavily impact how I see things now. If I found out it was 50 years from now, I think it would have very little impact.
Really?
And, just being my age, I've already had at least 10 friends, including one best friend, who have died, in their 20s and their 30s. That type of stuff is not lost on me. That being said, you think about things like this because I'm having my first kid now, and I'm kind of like, okay, well, that's it. My life's not really going to be about me anymore come late August, which is like a certain death of yourself. But
in one sense, I guess.
Because it's like, right. Well, but for years I've been like, oh, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a screenplay. I want to write a comic script and find an artist to publish it. And it's like, man, if I possessed the self-discipline to do any of that, I would have done it by now. I've got lots of things sketched out. And so I'm like, maybe I need that push so maybe knowing my death would give me the sense of urgency to not play video games for a day and do one of these passion projects that I feel so strongly about. Maybe having a child will do that, or maybe helping the child reach their dreams or whatever, and that doesn't, I'm not an unhappy person. I've, struggled with depression a lot personally in my past. But I'm definitely not like the rosy, optimistic person. And then the other thing that I think of is a friend of mine went on a date from a website a few years ago. This was pre-COVID. And on the first date, this guy says to her, I'm never going to die. Like, medical technology is advancing so quickly that by the time I'm old, like, all of the diseases and everything will be eradicated. And I was like, dude, the numbers are not on your side.
Yeah.
We're still batting a total goose egg on not dying.
There's also the grand assumption there of when I get old. Like,
well, yeah, you're not going to get hit by a bus after
you may not
date.
get. Yeah. No,
it's just crazy. So anyway, turn the question on you. If you could know, it sounds like you would take that information.
I think I would.
What would you do with it?
Well, so that's kind of what I wanted to get to a little bit with Mac, and also, but before I get there, I'm curious if you watched. There was a show that was released on Netflix last year. It's a Korean show called Hellbound, that deals with this kind of idea. The basic premise of this, it's based on a Korean webtoon of the same name. The idea is that this like otherworldly face, like an angel, appears in front of someone and delivers a decree that basically says you will die in X amount of time. It could be like in 5 seconds. It could be in 5 years. It could be in like 30 years. You will die and you will go to hell. And when your time comes, these like 3 like Hulk-like figures come and like you're killed brutally. Like it's pretty graphic on the show. And then your body is burned, like you're burned to ashes. And throughout the show, as you watch it, like anyone who gets a decree, like when their time is up, their time is up. And one of the things that arises out of that is this, obviously, if something like this were to happen, that you have this you're going to have these like cult-like figures and followers that arise. And minor spoiler, one of the guys who starts this church and becomes this like a cult-like figure, you find out that he received a decree that he was going to die in 20 years in the past, which meant that throughout his life, as he was building this cult following, in his mind, he had the freedom to he was essentially invulnerable for 20 years. And you see part of the mythos is that he stopped he unarmed, he walked up to a gunman like in a crowded mall or whatever and got him to put his gun down and not hurt anybody. There was like footage of him running out of a burning building to save someone who had left behind, things like that. The idea that he was performing these miracles, as it were, because he knew this wasn't public knowledge. He knew that, well, I know when I'm going to die. I have an ending.
Right.
Ergo, I can
Mac does, right? Mac immediately takes this information as a bulletproof vest.
Yeah. At one point she says, I know I'm going to die, but it's not today. Because in her mind, she's already accepted, I'm dying of leukemia in 4 years. So right now here, as I face whatever that, like a giant grub or something, and
so I guess my problem with both her theory and his theory is like, one, in her situation, I would think your current actions now in light of that knowledge could impact that outcome. You could die before then if you're actively changing the timeline. In the show story arc there, I'm like, well, if you go up to a gunman and he shoots you and you get hit in the spine and you lose, all function below the waist, you're still going to live for 20 years, but you might regret having done that. You're not bulletproof. You're just not going to die.
Entirely possible.
You could get a bullet lodged in your brain and live off a ventilator for 20 years, and be a vegetable, and that's how you die. So just a little dose of cynicism.
But I think with Mac, kind of specifically, you talk about the idea that she's already working under the idea, that she learns from those teens in the future that your end is your end. And so I think from her perspective, the idea that nothing she does, I think she's looking at the viewpoint of this is one timeline, that I'm not changing anything, that no matter what happens here, like I'm dying 4 years, I'm dying in 1992. So I think she's viewing it already that she can't change the timeline. There is no, this is what,
right.
In her mind, she's viewing what I posited was the Harry Potter timeline. There's one fixed timeline.
You've already done it.
Nothing changes except your perspective and your view. And your experience of time, not the events of time. So she's already in her mind, like, well, if I'm, she clearly has a bit of fatalism in her that's my end, because hey, that's what those guys in the future said. If this is how I go, then that's what it is. And it's not today. I got 4 years at least. So immediately her actions have changed. Cause, would she have, but then again, I say that and think, well, back in the first arc, when those teens, when they attacked KJ and Tiffany, or it was Tiffany, Mac jumped in immediately to try to defend her and almost got choked out before, Tiffany knocked her out with KJ's field hockey stick. So maybe nothing has changed in her. Maybe this is who she has always been. And maybe this information actually hasn't done anything different to her. Maybe she's not fundamentally different. Maybe this is just who her character is. She is someone that, whether she knows it or not, maybe she is someone who is a bit selfless in that way, willing to risk for her friends, willing to jump in, maybe to her own detriment, maybe, without thinking about it, she's going to act before she thinks. Maybe that's just who she is. And it's not about changing. It's not about having a grand revelation about her life. It's just understanding that this is what she's going to do. Whether she knew she has a death sentence or not, she's going to jump in and save KJ in that first arc. Hell, even when she jumps in and saves Aaron in the first issue from the four older boys, she's seemingly fearless, to stand up for someone she thinks is being wrong, specifically if they're her friends. So again, maybe knowing her future, as it were, hasn't fundamentally changed it. Maybe this is always who she is, but now only her perspective out of it has changed.
Well, that, and she, she like me. The funny thing is I read Mac and I'm like, oh, what a cynical little jerk. Even though I realized from my own answer to that question, I don't sound that different. And I've always surrounded myself with and been drawn to people who are more positive and optimistic. And I can sometimes be like the Debbie Downer, but I try not to be the spoil sport. I don't want to take anything away from people. I'm just like, I wish I could be as upbeat and optimistic as you are. And, we learn that Tiffany always trying to put a positive spin on things. Mm-hmm. Right at the end of this story arc, Max says, she just says she loves Tiffany.
Yeah.
Like directly to her. And that's a level of communication we've not really heard from Mac before.
No.
And Tiff has shown herself to be brave as well, and put her neck on the line for her friends, just like Mac. But I think it's also a character about Tiff that she's admiring and drawn to, because it's such a compliment to her and such an antidote.
I think so.
Kind of poisoned worldview.
There is kind of a self-correcting balance of kind of having a self-awareness of, maybe if I'm around some of these other people here, maybe it's not changing me, but maybe it's about finding balance in life there. Because someone like Tiffany is throughout, especially this arc, you see so much of the positivity, the spins of, she's mentioning like every car that goes by, how cool it looks and how different it looks. And Max just like, Jesus, shut up about it already.
I know.
Like, if you're going to stop looking at every single car.
I was alive in 2016. The cars weren't that nice.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
Certainly not mine.
Yeah. Well, and you also see, in that same sequence there, cause again, we have jumped from 1988, which is a general election year, to 2016, another general election year. They see a Hillary sign in a yard sign. And
Tiffany, how do you know we haven't had four presidents that are women?
Tiffany's first thought is, we get a woman president. And Max immediately like, no, it just means a woman's running for president. And immediately like, no, that's not what it means. And then, you said Tiff comes back with, wait, you don't know. We could have had four by now. This could be the norm. She's immediately drawn to the idea of, hey, this is not maybe the worst thing in the world right now. This is always kind of looking on the positive side. And while Mac is always kind of, maybe it's a defense mechanism. He's always looking on a little more the negative side, but yet, as you say, they both have the same instinct to that, regardless of what their view is, kind of maybe on the outside of the world itself, they're both willing to jump in and defend their friends, to jump in on behalf of them and protect them. Because, Tiffany even says when Mac is on about her, I'm not going to die today, blah, blah, blah. When they see in the mall, I'm going to say the smaller tardigrade, even though tardigrades are generally really small, Tiffany jumps on that to try to get it away from everybody. Cause that's what Mac was going to do. Cause Mac is already feeling like she's invulnerable right now. She's feeling invincible. But Tiffany's still like, no, it doesn't matter if you think you're going to die. I'm not going to let you do that. She's going to jump in and take that danger. She's going to take that risk. So in the end, they kind of get to the same viewpoint when it comes to their friends, when it comes to these people around. And even, I say friends is kind of a loose term at this time, because one thing we hear from Aaron specifically, that Aaron keeps, adult Aaron keeps saying, we'll find your friend who's missing. And young Aaron, 1988 Aaron is like, well, she's not really my friend, but like she specifically says she feels like she could be. These girls feel like someone they could be friends with, but they're not really friends now. And yet they are still drawn to each other. They're still willing to defend and fight for each other. And I think that speaks loads about their character and who they are, that regardless of their worldview, their upbringing, things like that, they understand that they're kind of in this together. And that's already bonding them, whether they really know it or not.
Yeah. Which just made me think of the iconic Tony Stark line. I got to tell you, he's not really my friend. Saving his life is more of a professional courtesy.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, someone might think, well, this came out starting in 2015 into the 2018. Is it really that prescient, his commentary on Hillary not winning the election? That the last issue of this story arc, which would be 10, was published in October 2016.
Yeah.
It presumably was finalized 3 months or so before that.
If
I'm reading like the letters in the back of Saga in March, they're letters like he's writing at Christmas time.
Yeah.
So he probably finished this
midsummer
story arc midsummer.
Mm-hmm.
So you hadn't seen a presidential debate yet. And really, this was probably issue 8, which is then going back to 7 or 8, which would be July or August of 2016, which then again, minus 3 months. You're talking. You just learned who the candidates
were. You're in primary season. Yeah, absolutely. There is a line at the beginning of issue 10 that Grandfather says when they show up and he asks what year they're in. And he's told that they're in 2016.
The problem.
Yeah, and he's like, oh, yeah, must be for this nation's election. Poor bastards have no idea the problems, capital T, capital P, are about to begin. And the fact that it's written as...
The problem's very large.
Yeah, exactly. It's like how they call them the troubles, like it's a specific thing. And yeah, this is, that issue was written, drawn, colored, and lettered months before. So there is a level of prescience there that, although I don't even think Brian K. Vaughan and company could even imagine what happened after that. But still, there is kind of a dose of cynicism there.
Yes, and I do think that was and that's my interpretive choice, but I think that was an honest, kind of transparent moment. I think, a writer like Brian will see different aspects of himself in different characters.
Probably, yeah.
But I think his cynical side is reflected in Mac.
I think so,
and it's really cathartic to put voice to that.
Yeah,
I think as a writer.
And you would think the optimistic side is Tiffany, the one that sees things that, hey, maybe they're not so bad. There are these conflicting things. And he takes them and puts elements of them in each of the characters. And so they can be in dialogue with each other. They can be in experience. Or maybe
you're the peace broker. You're the middle child. You're like the Aaron. Who's just trying to keep everybody together.
Exactly. Yeah. Aaron is trying to, and especially here there's only 3 of them since KJ is currently missing. Aaron is the one trying to grapple. And obviously she has this other thing of she's dealing with their future self, how does that mess with your head? The idea of, is this what the future's like? Is this who I end up being? And there are some great comedic moments there between the two of them. But yeah, she's kind of in the middle of like, in her mind, it's almost like it doesn't really matter how good or bad the future is right now. Cause what matters to her is just like, we got to find KJ. We got to get back to 1988, while you have these other 2 forces that are like, wow, the future's kind of great. This is kind of cool. And all this kind of sucks. Who cares? What's the point of all this? Those kind of 2 opposing voices, and Aaron kind of in the middle right now.
Well, and speaking of mess with your head, am I to understand that there is some Men in Black style mind eraser that the old timers have?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, the phonetic slip of referring to Alzheimer's as old timers.
Old timers, yeah.
The old timers. I got a chuckle out of that. There's nothing funny about Alzheimer's, but it is like when your antagonist, ostensibly your antagonist at this point, are the old timers.
Yeah. Yep.
And someone dies of what she hears as old timers disease.
I do believe those are called acorns. A phrase referred to the idea that an acorn misreferred to as an egg corn. Because, well, it's the idea that's, it seems to make sense, the mispronunciation, but yeah, it's a thing that the tree sprouts from. So it's like an egg, that kind of
egg
thing.
Shaped. Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea that old timers and Alzheimer's, that sort of thing. But yeah, no, there is, that's clearly, not a mistake.
And so here's the interesting thing. I think Grandfather mentions this memory wiping device kind of a neutral way. In fact, he's saying, like, now we have to act. We may not even be able to wipe everyone sufficiently, but we have to do what we're about to do anyway. Other Aaron knows that everyone's mind will get wiped and seems to resent it, sees it as an act of evil. Mm-hmm. She uses really violent, forceful language. And by other Aaron, I mean Clone Aaron. Mm-hmm. And this could just be because it's being done by her enemies, or she may have had negative experiences with it, but she sees it as a violation of people. Yet she encourages her Uber driver to, go ask out someone she has a crush on or something like that. She won't remember it. Well, neither of them will remember it in the morning.
There is a sense of resignation when she's talking about the mind wipe. It's just like, this is what's going to happen. Like, it's almost like, she doesn't have to like it or approve of it, but she knows this is the end. This is what they're going to do. That everyone in Cleveland, no one will remember this. This whole night will be wiped away. That's just what they're going to do. So you might as well just go for it because it's not going to matter, you know? But yeah,
Right.
she, the way she describes it is, yeah, they are in violation of some, I don't know, natural law or whatever, because it is invasive. The idea that you would take someone's memories.
I've never
against
understood how the memory curse in Harry Potter is not one of the unforgivable ones. I'm like, you could do so much damage with that,
and
I have some questions.
And it's shown multiple examples throughout the series of the amount of damage that it does.
It's it's key to the plots of 2 and 4.
Yeah.
And they just don't even think about doing it to Muggles. That's that's kind of a different can of worms.
But it is most definitely a huge kind of violation. And I mentioned the X-Men earlier. That's one of those things they always deal with the powerful psychics they have of Professor X and Jean Grey, and the idea that like they freely admit these are things that they've done multiple times to people, like against their will, and other people hear that and they're shocked, like, wait, what? And, Jean's like, yeah, what happens? What memory, change, things like that. It happens all the time. It's a current storyline in the X-Men books right now. The idea that, quote unquote, for the greater good, the idea of protecting mutant kind, they have gone and changed and erased memories against people's wills. And when you really boil that down, that's an incredible invasion of privacy, beyond just, the powers that you think a psychic can have of mind control and projecting images, things like that. The idea that they would straight up erase and change the things you think you know, and things you think you remember.
Right.
It would absolutely be something that you would think would be, if that power existed, would be something that would be wildly unacceptable.
There's always ethical questions about it, and the question of how much of who you are is shaped and permanently influenced by your memories.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which was, like one of my favorite movies of all time was Eternal Sunshine.
Mm-hmm. Great movie.
And great ethical questions, and not just ethical, but like, personal, who am I type questions. If I'm allowing a chunk of my memories to be ripped away from me.
Yeah. If I don't remember the things that
that was voluntarily, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And this is talking about involuntary. So it's so much worse. And speaking of references, there is what I assume will be an extremely dated Pacific Rim reference, if it's not already.
What are you talking about? Pacific Rim's a masterpiece. Get out of here.
I don't think that was the icon that maybe he thought it was going to be.
It absolutely is. Pacific Rim is incredible. Don't give me the slander.
Did they did a second one, right?
We don't talk about the second one. The second one wasn't very good. The first Pacific Rim is incredible. Come on. Giant mechs versus kaiju, incredible. Incredible movie.
I did watch it in the theater, and I had fun, and I had a good bucket of popcorn.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had exactly the experience I was supposed to have.
Absolutely, yeah.
Whereas I've mostly forgotten the details, but I did have a blast. But I'm not sure it's one of those movies that like 20 years from now will be like, oh yeah, that's a cult classic from the teens. But maybe it will be.
We'll see about that.
I thought it was interesting. You see the appearance of the old timers showing up in 2016.
Yes,
it's issue 9 now.
Mm-hmm.
And I would describe it as like a steampunk-esque,
definitely
air balloon type.
Definitely.
And I was like, it looks like the future that the past envisioned.
Yeah, 100%.
It's like
100%.
They're old timers. It's like if people from the 20s to 40s could project what flying things would look like, it would have looked like the Hindenburg with a luxury lounge, and that's exactly what they've made.
Yeah,
I love it so much.
Yeah, there's definitely the steampunk vibe. That's whatever decision they made in terms of how the future is going to look. That's clearly the vibe they were going for, because you can't look at that image and not think, oh yeah, that's definitely the kind of the quintessential retro future kind of view of the world. Absolutely.
Right. And then we learn that Clone Aaron, I scribbled this down and I'm having trouble reading my handwriting. It's from 6,800 years in the future.
I think it was I think it was
68,000
years in the future. That's where she says she wants to take the three of them. They have to go because that's where they're going to be safe. 68,000 years in the future, through what she calls the fifth folding. And going back to the
terrors,
KJ's field hockey stick. On one side we mentioned was etched, "Don't trust other Aaron," and on the other side was "Get to the fourth folding now." So. And when they see the fourth folding, adult Aaron gets a flash of where that is, and that's up in the sky above downtown Cleveland. And so they think that that's where they got to go because that's what the message on the field hockey stick says. But clone Aaron is like, no, we got to get to the fifth folding because we got to get you into the future here. We got to take you there because that's the only place you're going to be safe. And it brings into question, they know that this is, KJ's field hockey stick, wherever KJ is. They don't know where it is, but they know it's her stick. But they don't know if it's her handwriting. Yeah, they don't know who carved it. They don't know who's telling them to trust other Aaron. There is a question of, there are three Aarons here right now. So who is other Aaron? Is other Aaron clone Aaron or other Aaron adult Aaron? So
I think is unveiled when clone Aaron shoots adult Aaron, right?
It becomes clear because ultimately the girls do go through the fourth folding. They push clone Aaron.
Tabletop her.
They tabletop her. Yeah. And
we used to do it like football practice all the time.
We did it all the time as kids. And I'm surprised no one I knew got paralyzed because they fell back and broke their neck on something.
I see. We did it to people with helmets on, so I don't feel as bad about my participation.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Guys just standing on the sideline, not paying attention,
just getting shoved over. Yeah. But so but in the moment, there's an idea of, well, who is other Aaron? Because again, all three of our younger protagonists look at adult Aaron, and obviously they don't understand anything that's going on. There's a funny moment when young Aaron sees adult Aaron pop some Xanax and has a freak out of like, we taking drugs? What is that? And adult Aaron is like, it's Xanax. A prescription for it is for anxiety. And under her breath, she says, which clearly wasn't a new problem. The idea that,
although, I mean, in the 80s, the idea of taking medication for anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think, prescription drugs really ramped up a lot in the 80s. Yeah. But I don't think for stuff like that. I think that stuff is very 21st century.
I think a diagnosis of anxiety isn't something that would have been around then. So they look at Aaron, adult Aaron, as this like, kind of like a crazy person. Even at one point, Aaron. Oh,
they called into question regularly.
Yeah. At one point, younger Aaron, she turns to Mac and Tiffany is like, sorry, I think I might grow up to be mentally insane, because they just can't wrap their head around the person she's become in this world. And so, when you say don't trust other Aaron, why couldn't the person who carved this thing be more specific? You have a question about that. So they don't know who to trust. And I don't know about you, but when I first read that and every time I see it, go back and reread it. I get big time Lost vibes. I get big time,
others.
And I get season 3 finale, Through the Looking Glass, Charlie with his hand up against the window and it says, not Penny's boat.
Yeah.
And
wow, I'm glad I remember that line.
On one hand, no pun intended, it's the idea of, that's pretty specific, but also at the same time, like, what does that actually mean? And granted, he didn't have a whole lot of time to write a long message there, but the idea that you're giving a warning.
Yeah.
That puts you on the right track of thinking, but at the same time, there's still some ambiguity there. You've delivered a warning, but you don't know exactly what it means because you don't have time or space to really give it. And so the idea of, okay, well, they feel they got to trust this thing because they know it is KJ's field hockey stick, but they don't know where it came from. They don't know what it exactly means. They don't know who wrote it. And as we see 1988 Aaron, she's kind of playing both sides to try to figure out which one to trust. And ultimately, like you say, when when clone Aaron from the future ultimately gets a little pushy and shoots adult Aaron in the shoulder.
Yeah, that to me has always been the dead giveaway.
Yeah.
That someone shoots me.
Yeah, the person willing to pull the gun is probably not a person you want to be trusted.
That, and I really thought, even rereading it, I'm like, oh shoot, did adult Aaron just die?
Yeah.
Did young Aaron just see how she dies?
Yeah.
In adult Aaron, which would be a real trip and a real bummer way to end the issue. And then the parting words of adult Aaron.
Yeah.
This is paraphrased, but she says something like, "If I had my whole life to do over again, I'd stop being afraid of other people."
Yeah.
She really regrets letting go of these relationships.
Yeah. I think that part
is
may be my favorite
direction
bit.
Young Aaron's going anyway, right?
Yeah. I think that may be my favorite bit of this arc here is the idea that adult Aaron clearly, looking back at her life because she's being confronted with the 12-year-old self, knows that life hasn't been easy. There have been ups and downs. We can infer that from everything around her, that things, they're not terrible. She obviously, she owns a house there. She's employed, not the greatest job in the world, but life hasn't been maybe what she thought it was when she was that age, because she's reminded of that because she's confronted with her past self. But through all of that, looking back, she says, literally the only thing I would change is stay friends with these girls. Do that for me. Do that for us. Change that one thing. All the other things, this isn't again, it's not a Back to the Future thing where you're buying a gray sports almanac. You're trying to get yourself rich.
Right.
You're trying to hey, by the way, don't get in that car, or don't go to that show. Don't go to that party. Don't rush that story. Don't forget all these big decisions or potentially big decisions growing up. Don't take that job, whatever. It's stay friends with these girls, because she can see and understand that despite what life may bring her, that she knows is going to happen, having these friends in her life will be a positive influence. And that's going to be the most important thing. And I think that reveals something about Aaron's character, whether it's young Aaron, adult Aaron, that's the kind of person she is, that this connection that either she forgot or missed out on, because again, she doesn't remember getting shot. So she doesn't remember getting shot. She doesn't really remember the girls that she was with that night. Because as she says, after that one night of delivering papers, she never saw them again. Went to different schools. They never hung out anymore,
Right.
So she understands that.
Yeah, and there was no reason for them to be driving together when they're all delivering to separate streets.
Exactly.
It was a one-time thing.
Exactly. And so the idea that her one regret, one chain is the personal connection, And again, you're right. This is a path that younger Aaron is already on, because as she says, these girls aren't her friends now, but she feels like they could be. These are the kind of people she would want to be friends with and could be friends with, that would have an impact on her life. And so, yeah, it is kind of a reinforcing kind of circle there that the most important thing, that the focus of this story is the relationship with these girls and their connection together. And that through it all, through literal space and time, that's going to be the thing that draws them together and keeps them together, is the desire to want to be together.
Yeah. So would you say that you would bookmark it? Like, I'm still not settled on the name for that segment, but to close out each episode, I want to say what our bookmark is. Like, what's the thing you would return to? Favorite takeaway, favorite idea.
I think it's that moment, that conversation in the helicopter as they're going towards the fourth folding when Aaron says that, because she said literally the only thing she would change. Again, you think about it.
It's hard to compete with that.
Yeah, because you think about if I met my 12-year-old self from 1993, like what would you tell yourself? What would change? If you could do one thing, go back and change one thing.
And in like one sentence, right?
Yeah,
like getting ready to go back through a portal.
Yeah, to somewhere. You don't know where it is.
Right. You can't sum up the last 30 years.
Yeah. And the idea that the thing she would go back and change is personal connection. Because it's because she can see that being friends with these girls already seems like a positive influence on 12-year-old self. It's already beneficial in this younger version of self that she can't remember or or never happened to her. It's unclear. So that is going to be the most important thing. Change that, because that will have an effect. Maybe in her mind, that'll have a ripple effect going down. If you have those strong, positive connections with people you love and care about, people that you can rely on, that's the most important thing. As you say, stop being afraid of the people.
I think if she wasn't coming up to an empty house, I don't think she'd mind her job as much. And I think it just shows like I put my eggs in the wrong basket, basically. For happiness.
Yeah. And that happiness isn't, hey, when you're 22, take this job, not this job. It wasn't that decision. It wasn't. Right. Hey, when you have the opportunity to get a
you should have double majored in this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
had a minor in that.
Yeah. Or place a whole lot of money on Leicester City to win the Champions League. The Premier League or something like that. It isn't. It's beneficial. It's self-beneficial, but it's not a specific thing. It's an overall life thing of just having these friends is good, and it will be good. So do that. So I think that's the thing I come back to of when I read this arc again, just how lovely that is, and how I want to say it's obviously a selfish thing, because you're giving advice to yourself, but really it is a selfless act to be like, hey, I don't know how this is going to benefit me. I can't change my life by having you do something.
Your next 30 years will be better.
Exactly. Yeah. So it is a selfless act. So my second pick, my backup pick was Grandfather talking about how the Troubles are about to start, and just the idea that the Troubles again was capitalized, capital T, capital P, like that's a moment in time, which who knows, maybe in a few years we will look back on it and say, yes, this time was the Troubles.
It would be great to refer to Troubles as past.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. The problems. The
problems.
The Troubles are taken. I'm sorry. Apologies to that part of the world.
Yes. So I actually had a different bookmark, same ilk, and it definitely got overshadowed by that final panel. But it was earlier, probably issue 6 or 7, where young Aaron is talking to adult Aaron, and adult Aaron, they're getting ready to go into the mall. Adult Aaron apologizes for not being married and a list of other things. And young Aaron is like, I never wanted to get married. Yeah. Like, why are you apologizing for that? And like what that tells me, I had to chew on it for a little bit while I was reading, because on one hand it seems like a throwaway line. On the other hand, it's like, look at who you were. You never wanted that, but the world has beat you down, and you're now apologizing for things you didn't care about. Yeah. Like you've been reprogrammed by the world to care about X, Y, and Z when you, like in your truest self, don't care about those things. Yeah. Now you're apologizing to a younger version of yourself for something you never cared about.
The things
that's
you
how
think
lost you are.
The things you think were important as a kid, because you're looking back with regret, but you're actually talking to your younger self, and she's like, she talks about, listen, I like your haircut. It's a cool shirt. I'm glad we're not married. All these things, all these positive reinforced things. But you're right. That's such a wonderful scene between them.
And I think that's BKV. That's the power of youth, right? Yeah. It's like, you expect like the I won't call her the adult Aaron.
Thank you.
The adult Aaron.
We got to near the end before we did that.
Right. The adult Aaron is ostensibly the leader here, guiding the young one. But the young one is really providing all of the realignment, focus, and guidance for the adult Aaron. And, I kind of wonder if, watching yourself, your younger self, time traveling through a portal and being shot by a laser gun from 68,000 years of the future would be the exposure, like shock therapy that you need to rid yourself of modern anxiety. I would think it'd be a pretty potent cure.
It would have to be, because I said she's the things she's regretting, or the things she thinks she wanted to have, that she's being reminded of because she sees her younger self. And to have that younger self be like, nah, dude, like that wasn't the problem at all. Like the things that are bothering, the things that are eating at adult Aaron aren't the things that younger Aaron even cares about. Just adult Aaron has forgotten about that, because she's lived a life. And you always look back on, well, when I was that age, I wanted this, and this, because
it's a little bit of Peter Pan, right?
Yeah.
It's like he's forgotten adult Peter Pan is forgotten about Neverland.
Yeah. But yet when you're confronted with it literally face to face, and she gives that, I think it's cool. This is cool. I'm fine with this. What are you apologizing for? Adult Aaron thinks she's made mistakes.
I just love that line so much. Like, why are you apologizing? It's like, find something I care about and then apologize for that. Yeah,
that really is a beautiful set of panels there, and that scene ends with a big 1-page splash of them hugging. That embrace of of your literal inner child, as it were. That embrace of like, hey, like, thank you for that. The perspective that adult Aaron needed came from a child for her. Yeah, that's her.
It's very cool. Yeah. So I think we're about to wrap this one, but I suppose we should address that last panel.
Yeah.
Which this is not a spoiler now, but we are in a time traveling adventure, and I believe it's also not a spoiler to say that essentially each of these trades remaining exist within its own time period.
Yeah. So, I think we two stories in.
We were in the 80s for 6 issues. We're in the 2016s for 6 issues.
5 issues.
5. Yeah. What is wrong with me? I think 6 is such a common length.
It is. It's either usually 5 or 6. But yeah. So yeah, it's
so 5 issues in each, and now we're going 5 issues to another point in time, which I think you would instinctively say is the past. Except for that well-crafted Apple logo. It's not a like picture of an apple. It's the Apple logo.
Yeah.
On what looks like it would be, I don't know, an Aztec mound or something like that.
Some sort of ancient mound. Absolutely. Yeah. But the idea is, we've entered a new time. They did land. They find KJ. So our 4 girls are reunited. But yeah, we're now in a different space. And logically, as a reader, you would assume, well, we went forward in time, and the other option for them was to go further forward in time. So you would think, just from a storytelling standpoint, now we're going to go back in time.
And honestly, I know they go both directions, but my memory, it's been so many years since I read it, I actually don't remember which direction they're in. So I did not read ahead this week. Since I'm reading the deluxe edition, it was easier to find the stopping point this week.
Sure.
Last week I read into issue 6 thinking, oh, well, I'll just keep going to the end of what would be the first trade. And so I will read for next week issues 11 to 15, which is volume 3, set in a time to be established. Unless you have any other closing thoughts, I just want to thank everybody for listening. I can't wait to read any mailbag or just real-time social media comments, discussions on this, especially with the excitement of the TV show coming out. I think I really expect them to hit it out of the park.
I think so.
It seems like they've been working on this one for a long time.
So.
All the ingredients for a great show are there.
I was discussing this when the teaser came out with my brother real quick. Of all the Brian K. Vaughan potential adaptations, I think this one has the highest chance of success, just given the elements and the kind of the story structure and things you can expect. I think this one is going to be very, very good. And the little bit they showed looked fantastic. Again, whenever this airs,
shy away from the color scheme of
the
art.
Exactly. The what you saw, the kind of the 4 headshots of the girls, they're in the right dress, they're in the right hair. The color palette is exactly what you see Matt Wilson use, and obviously they've taken the logo, the design straight from Jared Fletcher. They're using that, which is awesome. There's no redesign there, so exactly they're pulling that inspiration. Where it's from and what they're using, it shows that they're committed, I think, to really making this as true to the source as they can. And I believe both Vaughn and Chang are serving as exec producers on the show, whatever that does mean, but that means I guess they have some input there. So very much looking forward to the final result.
For me. I've seen that go both well and poorly. Some people, I think, Brian K. Vaughan has said in one of his saga letters in the back of an issue, there's 50 of them. It's hard to keep track of which one it was. But he said, he answered the inevitable question of an adaptation. And he said, like, this one I don't really want adapted. Which suggests to me he's thought through, like, this one could be adapted.
Yeah, I think so.
Before he signed off on Paper Girls.
Yeah. Legendary, the production company, they bought the rights. They acquired the rights to all of his creator-owned work, including Saga, which means at some point they're going to try and make Saga. I've already accepted they're going to try, and I've already accepted it's probably not going to be very good because that's going to be really, really hard. But Paper Girls, I think this is one that has, I think, just the elements in play. The kind of story they're telling, the kind of story that the comic delivers, is the kind of thing that I think will resonate. And I think it's, if they stick to the source,
better than Why the Last Man, which, by the way, I have not yet read or watched.
You should definitely read it. And then
they just released the paperback compendiums.
Yeah, definitely.
And I bought the first one, and then I was like, I'm going to tear through that and be mad about not having the second one. So I waited for the second one. I was like, all right, now I can commence the reading. But I figured we would just do it on the podcast since you have read it, know where it's going, and it'd be a first-time read for me.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
We both know we love Brian K. Vaughan.
Yeah. You should definitely read it.
I can't imagine a world where I wouldn't like it.
Yeah, you should definitely read it, and then also definitely pretend like the TV show doesn't exist. Because that show...
That's a shame. I watched the trailer.
The show was cursed.
The trailer looked fine.
The show was cursed. It never had a chance to be great, which is unfortunate. They made some choices that weren't great, that didn't help things, but that show never really had a chance. But it is definitely a book that I think you and I should most certainly cover with a series of episodes, because it's a fantastic story with a lot of things I think that are worthy of discussion. A lot of big key element points that we can talk about and delve into.
Yeah. So if you'd like to hear us talk about that next or something else, frankly, we'll probably be recording the next thing by the time you even hear this, but it could be the next thing. You can tweet us at Storied Arcs. You can find us on Instagram at Storied Arcs. We will also be launching, and by now we'll have launched, a Facebook group for Storied Arcs discussion and storiedarcs.com. And you should be able to email us, Mike at Storied Arcs or Alex at Storied Arcs. And I think at some point we're even interested in doing, voicemail call-ins, possibly even interviews if we can get a hold of creators or anyone involved at any level with these companies. That would just delight me. But for now, we'll stick to what we know, which is trade by trade Storied Arcs. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Peace.